have a credit card for a reason. I can get anywhere
Okay.
very, very swiftly.
Okay.
Where are you guys playing? Is that home? The home game?
It's here.
The 21st.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm thinking about UNLV plays on the 18th in LA at SoFi Stadium. Yeah, they're playing half actually. So I was thinking about jetting out there.
Sounds like you need to spend some time with the Southern California PGA.
You know, well, I spend a lot of time with them.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Before I hand it over to Brian and our presenters today, I just have a few housekeeping procedures I'd like to go over. If you're not asking any questions or part of the conversation, please remain on mute so you do not interrupt the presentation. Video is optional today, but sometimes it's nice to see a face with the voice. So if you do want to toggle your screen on, that'd be great. There's one button I'd like you all to avoid hitting. It's a rectangle with an up arrow. It says do not share, or excuse me, it says share screen. I'd like you all to avoid hitting that so it doesn't interrupt the presentation. If and when you do have questions, please use the raised hand feature, put your question into the chat, or unmute yourself and we can prompt the speakers as necessary. If you have any technical issues, please put those into the chat and I'll do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that most of the time the issues stem from your own Wi-Fi connection. If anyone has called in via telephone today, please send me an email at mfrey@pgahq.com so we can make sure you get your PDR credits. And finally, we are recording this session this morning, so if you need to refer back to it or if you'd like to share it with some coworkers that weren't able to make it this morning, it'll be up on our YouTube channel hopefully later this week. With that, I'd like to introduce Brian Soule and to get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. We're excited that everybody's here this morning. This conversation comes from months of our conversations internally and being very excited about this topic and about working all together on this topic. And I'm very excited to introduce our two guest presenters today. Dr. Nicole Webster is the Associate Dean of Faculty Affairs and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And she is a professor in my home department at Penn State University, Recreation Park and Tourism Management. Kendall Murphy is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Troon Golf. Kendall and I have been friends for nearly 20 years, it seems, and we met each other when he was studying for his undergraduate degree with PGA Golf Management at UNLV. He worked as assistant director there for many years and has had some wonderful positions in the industry and now leads Troon Golf in this space. And we're just very excited to have them, and I'm going to hand it over to the two of you, and I think Kendall's going to take the reins on the presentation. So thanks for being here, and thanks for doing this today.
All right, thank you. Well, let me make sure. All right, I think we're back. I think we're in the game now.
Perfect.
All right, first and foremost, thanks everybody for having me. I'll let Nicole speak here momentarily, but thanks for having me, fellow PGA member. So always happy to be able to speak with my fellow PGA members and impart some knowledge or anything that I can do to to help you all just become better professionals and better human beings as a whole. So again, thank you for the invitation, Brian, and the rest of your fellow section members. Yes, let's see if this works. Like Brian said, I'm Kendall Murphy. My title has changed as of last week. So now I'm no longer the head of DE&I, but now I've slid more into a community engagement, business development role with the company, but still helping our company strategize around equity and inclusion, that kind of things too. But for the past 3 years, my world has been transforming our company into the leader of golf management companies within the space of DE&I, which we've done a fairly good job at as we've expanded our company from when I started 3 years ago. We were at 500, now we're up to 1,000 courses that we manage our own. So we've grown a lot. I'll stop talking and let Nicole introduce herself and say whatever she would like to say, and then we'll get started.
No, first of all, I want to say thank you and good morning and thank you. If I seem a bit tired, I am. I just flew in from Hong Kong a day and a half ago, so I'm still trying to figure out what time zone I'm in. But I do appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to just having a conversation with you all. I've been in this space as the Associate Dean for the College of Health and Human Development for about 3 years. And prior to that, I was a researcher, a faculty member, and enjoying my rather boring life as a faculty member. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to this conversation today. So Kendall, I'll turn it, excuse me, over to you.
Lily, before we actually get started, I really do want to just preface that this is an open, engaging, safe, fun conversation right here. This is not an accusatory conversation. This is not a conversation to have anybody walk away feeling bad about what they're doing, not doing, what they're thinking, not thinking, anything like that. This is purely informative, and actually the goal is for you to walk away actually feeling empowered and actually feeling like you've learned something and you now are eager to go implement some new techniques into your daily life. That's simply it right there. So I would like to start the ground was off as that, so that we're able to open up and have just a truly engaging conversation. And to honestly just because the more engaged you all are, the better the conversation goes, and then we're able to just actually get a whole lot out of it. So we're going to run through a couple basics, then we'll dive into some more specific topics around bias, and then we'll do some breakout groups, and then we'll do a slight discussion, a short discussion, and then that'll pretty much wrap up the day. So that'll pretty much be the agenda, and we'll go from there. So just giving a baseline, not knowing what everybody knows about DE&I and B, not knowing where you sit in it, what your stats on it, just to give a basic understanding of knowledge of what it is. When you think about diversity is a fact. When you think about equity, it's the result. Inclusion is your actual behavior, and then belonging is going to be a feeling. Okay. When you actually do look at the different characteristics of diversity, diversity embraces the presence of a wide variety of societal groups, as demonstrated here with this list, whether it be geographic, ethnicity, regional, disability, orientation, age, gender. It's how you look at how you group people together. Basically, what we look at for diversity, right? So when you think about diversity, it's not necessarily always going to be gender or ethnicity. There's many other ways that we look at that as well. When we think about inclusion, inclusion ensures that people of diverse backgrounds are welcomed and embraced in the same space. It promotes a feeling, and not just promotes a feeling, and not just of an invitation, but actually where you feel belong, right? So you always want to be invited to the party, but you also want to feel like you belong at the party, right? So you just don't want to say, hey, I opened the door for this person, but then when they walk into the door, they are greeted with frowns or questions of why are you here or are you lost, right? So that kind of takes away from the good deed that we just did, right? The invitation is great, but there's one step beyond the invitation, is actually making sure that people feel welcome with that invitation. And then we look at equity. Equity is a result of diversity and inclusion over time. Equity acknowledges that societal differences do exist, and it works to address those gaps, to bring people together and things together for the overall outcome of all people to kind of have the best playing field as possible. Then lastly here, just want to quickly hit on the difference between equality and difference between equity, right? A lot of times we merge them together and we can use them incorrectly. We can understand. So this graphic right here is a really cool graphic. And just by looking at the graphic, you can probably understand what the differences are, right? And how we look at it. So when you look at equality, you're basically saying that everybody has the same access, the same things, no matter what. And here you go. So if everybody needs 5 golf balls, everybody is going to get 5 golf balls, right? Not thinking about what other situations may hinder that individual from actually being on the same playing field, right? Whether it be economics, whether it be ability, whether it be whatever it could be, right? So you look at the graphic on the right side, now you look at equity of it and you see, okay, there's a tall person that was on the block before. He no longer needs that block. Instead, we're going to give the middle person 2 blocks. So now they can see everything. Another person that's in the wheelchair has a ramp now to be able to see over the wall. So now everybody can see over the wall, but we've addressed the individual issues that would have hindered that person from having a true equal opportunity. So that's a good way that I like to describe it, to where it's not like we want to make sure that we're not just saying, hey, we're going to give everybody the same chance, but we're going to actually look at, okay, we're going to give people the same chance, but what in addition is necessary to make sure that everyone actually has the true access to the outcome that we want, right? Not just the ability, but the outcome. And then ultimately, to keep it simple, what does it all mean? Diversity looks like hiring employees or associates, we call them in Troon, of all different backgrounds. Equity essentially means those employees or associates are given the resources needed to gain access and opportunities to do the best that they can do. And then inclusion is then going to mean that their voices are equally heard and valued. The value part is probably the most important part, because as you're looking at your staff, no matter what their race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it is, you want to make sure that everybody on your team, as you all know, truly feel valued and truly feel like they have a buy-in into the operation, no matter how high or low up on the totem pole that they actually are. And then this is where we're going to dive into biases and unconscious biases. And I'm going to breeze past this a little bit and then pass over to Nicole to talk about biases, both conscious and unconscious biases.
All right. Thank you so much. Could you go back to the previous slide? All right. Thank you. So first of all, I want to say we find it extremely important to ground this conversation in kind of those basic definitions. Oftentimes when we enter into this space of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, people ask themselves the question, well, what does that all mean? Excuse me. So that's why we started with those baseline definitions. But the other piece that we feel is extremely important in helping people to understand why this is important is in this world of biases. And I know that we've heard this oftentimes before, discussed in various ways. And so I'd like to start off first by just framing what we mean by bias. And so a bias is basically a judgment that we have in favor or against a person, place, or thing, or a group of people. But it's something that when we think about bias, it could be a feeling or something that we've been taught from, a child. That unconscious bias, though, is something that we don't necessarily think about. It's something that we know is deep down in us. It could be based on our childhood, childhood upbringing. If you're from a regional place in the U.S., or maybe you're from another country, something that has been taught or you've learned, and when you make decisions, sometimes that is filtered into your decision making. And so I'll give an example. I always like to be vulnerable in this space. When I think about bias, because we all have biases, a bias for me is if someone likes pecans or walnuts. So I'm going to tell you why. Because I grew up disliking these types of nuts, and I always used to think people who eat these nuts, like something is wrong with them. And I will tell you the reason why is because I remember seeing the pecan and walnut trees and how excuse me, they were just like bountiful and plentiful, and people were just picking these walnuts up all over the place, putting them in all their foods. And for me, I was like, what is this the only food that people have to eat? When I would see people cooking with it, and so now I have this this bias. Like when I think about people who like foods with nuts, and they automatically say, oh, I want pecan pie or something. For me, it's like just a feeling like, what is wrong with you? Because there's so many other pies that you could like. So that's just a bias that I have. Doesn't mean I dislike the person, just using that as an example. But it's when we think about biases, that's something that's lighthearted, but we know that there are often folks who, have been taught different, let's say, value systems that really go against the grain of, let's say, working with people or valuing what people bring to a space. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that presents itself within our workplaces. So Kendall, if you can move to the next slide.
Sorry, my first time controlling PowerPoint.
No comment. All right. Okay, so I'd like for us to dive a bit deeper into unconscious bias. And I don't know if we use the chat feature? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So I'd like for us, before we dive into this, I want you to think about a time that perhaps you were making a decision. You don't have to say what that decision was, but you were making a decision, and based on who was in front of you, or perhaps the decision that had to be made, you thought about something that had nothing to do with perhaps the framing of, let's say, the decision that had to be made, but something kind of popped up in your mind, like, I'm making this decision not necessarily on all the facts that I have in front of me, but maybe on a feeling that I have, or something that I read. Can someone put in the chat if that's ever happened to them before? I can't see the chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. So perhaps I'll pick on Brian. Brian, you were working with students, and a student walked into your office, and you had to make a decision on giving this person a grade, but they had, this particular student had a history of being late and coming to your office. on a regular basis. Did that filter did that kind of, let's say, previous interactions with that student perhaps make you feel a bit strained in how you perhaps work with them, or a decision that needed to be made?
Yes, I think two general examples. One, certainly the boy who cried wolf, right? The person who always has the excuse, and then they finally do have
Mhm.
the legitimate reason for a request or whatever that might be. I don't know if this qualifies, but in the opposite way, I've had students where I know that they come from affluent areas, and they come into my office and ask for financial support, scholarships, and such, and I can't get it out of my mind that I know that their family has a membership at a nice club.
Perfect. That's a perfect example of a bias,
Mm.
because you know already that this person's financial background doesn't warrant that. Perfect. Are there any other examples that folks might want to give? I can't see. Oh, there's lots of folks here. Okay. All right. Perhaps not. We understand it's early, but thank you, Brian, for providing that. I think that's a perfect one. I will give one more before we dive into this. We have let's say new student orientation, and I remember someone saying to me that they were working with students during this time. So they come in, I think, about a week or so before classes begin. And just like Brian, this family came in and they were asking about not only financial aid, but some other resources that one might not think that a family of this financial standing needed, because they came in on a private plane. And I remember, right, that we do have a few of those in the college. And I remember talking with this individual who said, for me, and they knew what unconscious bias was. They said, for me, I couldn't get it out of my mind that this person comes from not just affluent, extremely wealthy. They go home every weekend on their private plane, or they were going to be going home almost every other weekend on their private plane. But yet they were actually asking for resources for another family and not themselves.
Mm.
And so they had already made this decision that I didn't want to give them a fair chance because of who they were. And so I use that example to say that is what unconscious bias is. We already have a framing or a filter of what or who someone is based on, excuse me, some association with this particular case. In the case that Brian gave, it's the wealth that these individuals have. But we make unfair judgments about these people based on their characteristics or value systems that they may have, without consciously being aware that is clouding our judgment. And it may be, oftentimes it is unintentional, but we do use that in order to sometimes make decisions or how we frame conversations. And excuse me, especially in the case of when we're talking about hiring individuals or training individuals, we need to be very aware of how bias is filtered and comes into those conversations. I think the one key area, and then I'm going to ask Kendall to see if he has anything that he'd like to add here. Within any industry, whether it be golf or higher education, as I'm in, or even let's say any other industry, we think about unconscious bias. We discuss unconscious bias, but we don't really think about or discuss that impact that it can have on our decision making and how we treat individuals, those resources that we may provide individuals as they walk in the door. Excuse me. how we need to be mindful about our decision-making process as managers, as educators, whatever space that we're in, and how that can influence our decision and impact the decisions that we have that can have long-lasting impact on an organization. So Kendall, I want to just turn it over to you to see if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, it was great. Yeah, to that point, just to bring it into a golf context, since we're all here in the golf profession, and I'm sure many of you are. It doesn't matter if it's a public access facility or a private access facility. One of the big things that we suffer from as an industry is really welcoming people in, right? And a lot of that comes from unconscious biases, as Nicole was referring to. And one thing I would challenge you all to do as leaders at your clubs is, as leaders of the clubs, we tend to have our eyes open, and we're forward thinking, and we're welcoming everybody. We want everybody to feel comfortable, whether it's our teams or our members or our guests. But there's another level to this, right? We could welcome in the whole world to our facility, but once they get through that door, what is the rest of our team and our staff doing? So I challenge you to just think about that, over the winter, and think about it as you're gearing up for 2025 season. How has your staff been prepared to welcome all the people that you want to come to your club, right? We know you want your club to be vibrant and everybody to be there and have a great time, but is your team set up to do that? Is your team prepared to do that? Or are they, have we addressed, biases and unconscious bias and unconscious biases to ensure that, people walk through, whether it's a man, a boy, a woman, somebody that comes from, a different background, somebody that comes from a different country, someone that looks different, what judgments are going on, what's their experience going to be like. That's kind of just to bring it, just to make it a real world situation, what. So I would just challenge you all to think about that, as you're planning for 25. But again, I'm encouraged that you all are doing a great job at it. It's just a matter of us now just making sure that the people at every line of our organization are doing it as well, so that now we're eliminating as many barriers as possible for people to have a great experience at the course and the club. So yeah, that's my little 2 cents of feedback there.
All right, thank you, Kendall. And then finally, just realizing that once we are able to recognize and recognize that we have biases, and we all do, that we can begin to work on challenging our own selves, because until we work on ourselves, we cannot impact the spaces in which we are in. So I say all that to say that once you identify the biases that you may have, it is a process. I'm going to say sometimes these things don't go away, but it's how do you address that? So, we talked about the bias that we may have towards this particular family that comes from wealth, and addressing that bias up front. It was very clear that those of us that were in that space needed to take a step back and actually listen to the request that was being made, that this family was not asking for resources for themselves, but rather to help a family that they were working with, or I think the daughter or the son, whomever that was, their student, was asking for their friend. And so sometimes it requires us to take a step back and do some self-reflection, active listening, and really engaging in that space so that we can provide those support systems that may be needed in order for us to have a more inclusive environment. Can you move to the next slide? So again, just to move from left to right here, when we identify the biases that we may have, we're then able to be in a space to address them. Which I want to say here that this is addressing biases is continuous. It will require us to, oh, sorry, I see a chat. So I'm going to just finish this thought and then I'll move to the chat here. Call for us to have continuous learning and self-reflection, because if we're not in a space where we are reflecting on ourselves and this mindset that we bring, we will never get to the last point, which is being able to promote and support an inclusive environment. So let me just stop here. I see that Matt Cunningham has posted something in the chat, and I'd like to read it out. Sorry, in case some of us aren't able to see the chat. He says, I had an interview with a potential assistant professional. He has earrings and full beard. His appearance was not what my GM was used to. He based his initial appearance led to his bias. I hired the applicant because he was a great fit. He still works with me today. Having a bias may lead to not hiring the ideal candidate. You must take a step back before making judgments. Thank you so much, Matt. That is a wonderful example of just the steps that were taken within this space to recognize that perhaps the way this person presented themselves, which is not what I'm going to use in quotes the norm, because oftentimes that's the space or the spaces that we're moving into, where people say that person doesn't look like what someone should look like. And the fact that you were able to step back and say, this person is talented and what they need for my team is a perfect fit. It's wonderful, wonderful. If anyone else has any examples they would like to share, please do put them in the chat. I'm just going to ask Matt, you don't have to go on camera, you can put it in the chat. But did you receive any pushback after you hired this individual? Maybe he's typing. Okay. Hopefully he did not receive any pushback from from others in the organization. Okay. So someone said the low-hanging fruit for bias is politics. Okay, thank you, Matt. No pushback. Thank you. Great.
That's awesome.
It is. It really is. Excuse me. The low-hanging fruit for bias is politics. So members of each party believe the other party is gullible, easily influenced, and don't think for themselves. So Tim Helper. So Tim believes that Tim has posted it about politics. I do think that that is an easy. I'm going to say right now, it is very easy for us to fall into this category of political biases and what one believes a political party represents. And while excuse me, we know that right now we are in a hypersensitive state of let's say the political landscape. I think that it's still an opportunity for us to take a step back, whether we're in our workplace, whether we're having individual conversations with folks, to take a step back and look at people as individuals and not who or what they may represent because of a particular party that they represent or may be affiliated with. Kendall, did you want to kind of add anything to that?
No, you pretty much hit it on the head right there. I mean, we are in a space now to where it's easy just to say leave politics at home and don't worry about it, and just do your jobs and come in. But it's gonna, especially in our industry, we're gonna see it every day from both sides. And in reality, from a bias perspective, keeping this conversation, it is very important for us, especially as facility leaders, to make sure that we maintain an open mind to everything, and we maintain a welcoming environment for all, whether you believe in their political views or their religious views or their whatever views. You're still, we're operating in a space of recreation at the end of the day, and we're providing people access to a game. So in reality, we have to remember that our business is to give people great experiences, and to make sure that our teams understand that, but to also protect our teams to know that, hey, you don't have to engage in conversations that you aren't comfortable with. You don't have to be subjected to anything that's negative towards you for any reason. But just to know that to make sure your teams feel protected in that environment, but also to know that, you're not ignoring it, but you're simply just not engaging in it. That's kind of where I would draw my line if I was leading a property right now, to not ignore it, to acknowledge it, but to also, not engage one way or the other, and just kind of stay down the middle.
Thank you, Kendall. All right, let's move on to the next slide. All right, so we'd like for you to we're gonna do this exercise in about 10 minutes. This is extremely important because while we've talked about biases, we've talked about unconscious bias, which definitely, as I said, we all have. In order for us to really push the needle and understand how to check our biases, we have to understand who we are and what we bring into the spaces where we work, live. And, I know we're talking about the golfing industry, but this is a space where you're interacting with different types of people, but you show up as yourself. So we'd like for you to do what's called the identity circle. And what this is, it allows us to take a deeper dive, and we don't have really the time that we need, but we're going to just do a snippet of this for you to take a dive into who you are. So we're going to look at the diverse perspectives that we bring. How do these perspectives really impact the way that we work with individuals, the empathy that we have, and ultimately, how does that ourselves, the spaces that we're in, have an impact on, the decisions that we make and the interactions with others. So when we're able to look at our diverse perspectives, think about how we deal with individuals, and hopefully using that information, we're able to create spaces where we understand why inclusivity is important. So if you can move to the next slide, Kendall. Can you make this larger? And perhaps not. Okay, I will read it out and then we're going to break into breakout rooms.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. So as you can see, this is a ring, and there are different characteristics that define who we are. So ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, sex, and when I say sex, like how you identify male, female, non-binary, what have you, sexual orientation, your national origin, your first language, your physical, emotional, developmental ability, age, a religious or spiritual affiliation, and race. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that important? Well, for 99.9% of us, we bring some percentage of these into the spaces in which we're in. We might not necessarily think about it, but for many of us, we do. And so what we'd like for you to do is take that first, the first two questions or statements here. We want you to think about the identities you think about the most, identify, the identities you think about the most and think about the least. And do that first. And in your breakout groups, you're going to discuss how do these impact perhaps the decisions or the interactions that you have with individuals. So I will,
Matt.
we're not on Zoom, so I was going to say I will post them in the chat, but we can't do that. But if you just remember, I want you to identify those identities you think about the most and those that you think about the least. When you break out into your breakout rooms, we want you to discuss, how do you bring these into your professional roles? So the statement that's here, which ones are most viable in your professional role? So if you can, Matt, if you can break people out into groups of 4.
Yeah, shouldn't be a problem here. It might be a little more than 4 if that's
okay, that's fine. It can be 4 or 5.
Okay.
However you break it out. I don't know.
Got it. All right, I'm gonna do this now, so everyone should be shuffled up automatically.
And we'll come back in about 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Oh, there's Eric. Kendall, I'm not going to join a group.
Yeah, we'll give him 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I think stay on time.
I think some folks are still joining.
Okay. Let's see. Breakout 4. Everybody goes left the meeting and Coach joining. Okay.
Oh, mute myself here. Matt, thank you for your comment earlier. I I can only imagine your what you had to go through, because I'm dealing with that right now with the current hire. So thank you for sharing.
Nicole, thank you, and good luck with everything with your hire.
Thank you. Thank you. Um it's really interesting. People, I'm hiring someone who's neurodiverse,
Okay.
and they they stutter really. They stutter, but their stuttering is not really prevalent unless they're nervous.
Okay. Sure. Yep.
Yeah. And I remember talking with someone and saying, "Oh my gosh, this person is like a perfect fit for the office." And oops, sorry. And so they said, yeah, but the way that they speak. And I said, well, how, I asked them, well, how do they speak? And they said, well, I can't really understand them. So I said, okay, how does that impact their ability to work with our constituents? And they said, it doesn't. It's just I feel like I'm gonna have a problem with them because of the stuttering. And I said, well, that's something that you're gonna have to work on, and maybe, offer to send them to classes and to learn more about what stuttering is and why people do stutter. And after I think, giving this person some space to do their own learning, they had an opportunity to say, I really like what this person is going to bring to our office.
Sure.
So, yeah.
It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Looks like we're only about halfway back.
Okay. Oh, I see some faces now. Hi, MJ.
I've got a bias against MJ because of his New York Yankees hat. I just
Oh,
want to say it.
yeah.
Got to come out with
Eric
it.
Hanley.
Good morning.
See a lot of
Apologize
faces
for my late attendance.
That's all right. You know what? I should have said my bias is when I see people who wear Georgia gear, since hey, I'm a Florida girl. So just
I love it.
just saying.
Mhm.
I have a bias against students who wear other university gear when they're a student here at Penn State.
Mm.
Oh goodness.
And he's good at making them feel uncomfortable about it too.
I'm sure.
Particularly when it's Carolina or Duke.
We won't go there.
All right, let's look like everybody's. Looks like we're almost here.
Okay.
Almost there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we could probably get going.
All right. Let's hear what a few groups discussed, and I'm going to actually choose the group that I have popped into, and I remember seeing Wallace in that group. I popped in and then popped out, so I'd like to choose that group, and if you can talk about what were some of the common themes or differences discussed in the group. I think it was Wallace. There was somebody else in your group, and they talked about age. And And so anyone from that group, if you're willing to share?
Yeah,
Just- Okay.
I'll jump in. So we talked about age, physical ability, religion, I think was an interesting one. Kind of like the biases that you can and can't see. I think Courtney said religion, which was interesting. And I kind of talked a little bit about being a mixed race person in the industry. So something you can see opposed to something you can't see. So I found that interesting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey,
What
Brian,
about-
our group came up with a couple good things. You want to?
Yeah, I appreciated being in a group with Jennifer, who, we had a nice conversation about what it means to be a woman in the golf industry, in a male dominant industry, and the challenges that go along with that, and what changes that Jennifer's seen in inclusion for women in the industry. It seems as though there is a bit of momentum in a good direction, but a lot of work to be done.
Wow. Thank you. Any other group? I know we have about 10 minutes, but I would like to ask if there are any others who had a discussion that perhaps landed on something different than what's been said. So we have, gender, religion that was brought up. I'm going to say race, ethnicity. Nick, I know, you talked about being a mixed race person in that space. Okay. All right. Well, this is just a snippet of an exercise. And if we had more time, this would actually be really interesting to dive into. But, hopefully from your group discussions, excuse me, you could see that, as individuals, we bring ourselves, and I always talk about bringing my authentic self to the spaces in which I'm in. And because of the authenticity that I bring to these spaces, it may impact the biases or the biases that I may have as I'm working with individuals. But being able to check that because of having a clear understanding of who I am and the spaces in which I'm in, oftentimes has had I think a positive impact on the decisions I'm able to make. So in this case, when we think about who we are, our gender, our religion, even our we didn't talk about this, but our educational background, maybe where we grew up, all of these things, when we think about how they shape who we are, that's where we get our biases from. So sometimes people ask the question, well, I don't, or say, I don't have a bias. I don't have biases. We all have biases. I just mentioned about Florida. If someone who maybe has on a Georgia shirt, that is a bias for me because I went to the University of Florida. And so I think the world revolves around anything orange and blue. But I say all that to say that sometimes I will make a decision, or I will have a thought, not a decision, but I have a thought sometimes when I hear someone with a Southern accent, that now we're talking about real biases. Sometimes that is a bias, and I have to check myself to say, this person is not X, Y, and Z just because they have a Southern accent. And I think that we have to check who we are when we come into the door, and how that may impact our decision making. So if we can move to the next slide. All right. So, as we bring this to a close, we really want you to think about how are you going to take this information that you've learned today and use it in a way where you are constantly self-reflecting on you as a person, you as a manager, you as someone in this golfing industry, and how how does that begin to impact not only the decisions that you make, but I want to go back to the policies that are being created, the trainings that are being developed, because if we're really talking about creating an inclusive golfing environment, we have to begin to think about creating structures and avenues that allow us to create inclusive environments that's not just lip service. And so the first is addressing our biases, understanding who we are, the spaces that we bring, beginning to build in these inclusive practices, which for me are policies, our programs, and how do they, impact the world and the golfing industry in which you all are in. How do we begin to educate others? So as leaders in this space, are you in a position to really impact and help impact others, help them with their own growth and development, and then creating a culture of open dialogue where folks are comfortable enough to have these conversations that sometimes are uncomfortable. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Kendall.
That's great. Yeah, I have nothing to add to this slide. With that we haven't already said already. That's just I really just want to encourage everybody, to just kind of take this very quick. I mean, this exercise, really should take a couple of hours. But the fact that we did it in a few minutes, it's really was just a very high level exercise to ultimately get your brain working, just to get you thinking about how your mind works, the psychology within your brain. Like, have you start now as you walk into the dining hall, you're going to be able to say, what am I thinking right now? And be able to go take those processes and that thinking and be able to actually activate new practices or enhanced practices that you already have in place for your 25 and beyond season to make sure that not only your workplace is inclusive, but your environments that you surround yourself in outside the workplace are inclusive as well, and that now you're able to supply resources to your teams to be able to be the best they can professionally and as a person, but also to be able to provide the best level of service to your clientele, and be able to welcome a whole new group of individuals in, and to be able to increase what you're doing in your business. So that's just my portion right there for this slide right here. But you should walk away feeling encouraged with this conversation, and feeling like now you have another way of thinking about things. Nicole, do you want to? I know we got like 3 minutes. Did you want to wrap it, or were you good on this part?
We can just go to the next slide and wrap it up.
Okay.
I think if you want to take a picture of this, that's fine. But I think that this is a nice way to end this conversation today. Again, conversation, and we talked about identifying biases and addressing them, but we wanted to provide you with just a quick snapshot of what these may look like as you walk away from this workshop this morning. Just take a minute to think about what might this look like, and when we talk about biases, unconscious or conscious bias, what that might look like, and how might you, in the role that you sit, begin to address some of these, because some of them are not so in your face, but they're very subtle. And so we want you to just land here, settle on this, and we hope that we've provided you with just a snippet of information that will allow you to start thinking, questioning, and hopefully beginning to make some significant changes in the spaces in which you're in. So I will just say thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to dive into trends, but I will tell you the industry is up. We're becoming more diverse, we're becoming more inclusive. So kudos to you all for what you've been doing. This is me wanting to land the plane on a very positive note that says we're doing decent job. Let's continue to keep our foot on the gas, continue to move forward. It is proof by every study that we've ever done that the more inclusive, the more diverse your teams are, the more the higher your ability to be able to maximize your revenues. Those are proven. So it's good to continue to do all of that. And again, just like Nicole said, we just want to say thank you for the time. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be able to speak with you all. Brian has both our contact information if you want to talk offline about things. I know, not volunteering Nicole, but I know we would both be happy to answer any questions and help you out in any way that we can. Brian,
Yes.
all yours.
Kendall, Nicole, thank you. If you're able to hang around for a few more minutes, just in case there's any burning questions or conversation pieces, would love to do that. But otherwise, thank you, Matt, for organizing today. We really appreciate your help, and we appreciate everybody being here.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much, Nicole and Kendall and Brian. That was very informative, and I think our audience probably got a lot out of it.
Thank you.
I will hang on for a little bit if anybody wants to hang out. Otherwise, have a great rainy Wednesday. What day is it?
Thank you.
What day is today?
Wednesday.